Good afternoon, everyone. So today's topic is nutrition. And today we're very kindly joined by Lisa, who is a nutrition expert. So thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today. Nutrition, absolutely vital. So no matter what your goal, be it weight loss, performance, or just general health, if your nutrition isn't right, you will not get results, okay? So that's why today I thought it would be really interesting to invite Lisa to sort of share her knowledge with us. So for those who don't know Lisa, Lisa, could you just sort of introduce yourself and just give us a bit of a background info on yourself, please?
Awesome. Absolutely, not a problem. So my name is Lisa. I'm a full-time nutrition coach. I am from Germany originally. I'm currently in Spain though. So I kind of travel around a bit, but yeah, nutrition and fitness is my passion no matter where I am. I have been working as a full-time nutrition coach for about 2 years now. Before that, I did some time in New Zealand police, where I was living for quite a working in a high school in the field of sport and recreation as well. So sports always been like part of my big part of my life, and eventually I kind of realized that without nutrition, as you said, Heidi, not that much is happening. I mean, we can always try, but we can never really optimize things unless our nutrition is on point as well. So eventually I just out of personal interest and also out of personal struggles, actually, to be honest, I found my way to nutrition, experimented a lot with very many different things, very many different diets, which I'll get into later on, low carb, low fat, keto, paleo, you name it. And so basically, eventually I ended up where I am now, which is just trying to educate on a very balanced nutritional approach, and by keeping calories and your macronutrient distribution in check, and therefore helping optimize your performance. So that's where I'm at.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Lisa, in as much it is an education. And I think people go wrong because they actually don't understand nutrition at all. So it is all about educating people. Brilliant. So like today we have got probably people with all different range of goals. So weight loss, performance, and general health. So I thought what we try and do today is to just cover a bit of everything, okay? So everyone can hopefully take a bit from this interview today. If anybody who is listening live has got any questions, feel free to use the chat thing. Hopefully I will be able to pick up on any questions, and then we can ask Lisa as we go when it's appropriate to, okay? So just really starting with the basics, Lisa, fundamentals. If I'm someone who, say, wants to improve their nutrition, but I haven't got a clue where to start, what would you say is the most important thing for me to focus on?
So when we want to improve things, it's often easy to, or well, it's not so easy, but there's so much information out there. And so it would be easy to jump on the next best fad diet or the next best thing that, you know, the media is currently telling you. At the moment, it might be keto or low carb or vegan or whatever. And maybe 20 years ago, it was low fat. So we often tend to jump on the bandwagon, but then we find out we can't really sustain that. And the reason is real basic of your food should be whole foods, should be good quality nutrition. And so things that have grown on the earth, things that have crawled or walked or swam the earth or flown above the earth. So, you know, lots of plants and vegetables, but also grains, especially if you are training. And most definitely, which is one part that a lot of people leave out, enough protein. So enough good quality, either animal or plant-based protein. That kind of also depends on personal preference, but we'll get into what kind of protein a little bit more later on. The main thing is just, if someone has absolutely no idea, I would say a few things to focus on would be enough hydration during the day, at least 2 liters per day. The second thing, including vegetables, at least a cup handful of vegetables per meal. And if it's in the morning or something like that, maybe some fruit, not too much fruit, more vegetables though, and then also trying to include some protein in all of your meals. That would be a really, really good first base, in addition to, of course, getting enough sleep and managing your stress really well. And then we could move on from there.
Yeah, so that's really useful. So in as much as moving on, so if I did, like, you know, I was starting to think about weight loss, or, you know, I wanted to think more about trying to improve my performance if I was, you know, an athlete, how can I sort of take it to the next level?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it kind of bringing it back to, okay, why do most fad diets or most diet trends work initially? And the reason for that is they usually somehow induce a calorie deficit. So, okay, let's say you suddenly decide you're going low carb. That probably just means you're cutting out a whole, a whole food group, and therefore reducing your overall calorie intake. Or you might be going vegan and suddenly you're losing some weight because you've cut out meat as an entire food source, basically. So in the end, what it all comes down to, though, is if you want to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit, which means consuming less calories than what you're expanding. If you want to, put on muscle mass, you should probably be in at least a small calorie surplus, so consuming more food than what you're burning. If you want to just maintain your weight and possibly, change body composition, and so increasing lean body mass and decreasing fat mass, that would mean same calories in as same calories out. But in all cases, we have to make sure we're getting the right macronutrient distribution. So the right amount of carbs, the right amount of fats, and the right amount of proteins, which is all a little bit different depending on how active you are, how much what kind of training you're doing. Is it more something like sprinting, or is it more endurance type training? So this is all sort of influential, but the next thing you could do is simply try and find out how many calories am I currently eating and how many should I actually be eating for my goal. So a very simple way to just start with that would be starting to track your food intake for 5 to 7 days in any of the current, macro or calorie tracking apps out there. Something like MyFitnessPal, My Macros, Chronometer, Lose It, whatever. There's tons of them out there. So simply just tracking what am I currently eating, because I always compare it to a roadmap. You can never know what your best path should be if you don't know where you're starting, right? If your GPS doesn't know where you're coming from, how would you ever know where to go? So basically trying to figure out where am I at, what am I currently eating, and what is happening over that time. So let's say my average calorie intake over that week would be 2,000, and I wouldn't be losing any weight, or my weight wouldn't be going up either. That would be roughly my maintenance calories. However, if over the course of the week I'm consuming 2,000 calories and my weight is going up, that is likely a little bit of a surplus, so you might be gaining weight with that. That would be a good place to start for most people, just trying to find out where they are right now, and then we could take the next steps from there.
Great. So in order to find out where we are right now, do we need to be doing any calculations or that sort of thing, or would you just purely recommend just seeing where you're at the moment by taking that 5 to 7 day sort of average?
Yeah, precisely. The tricky thing is usually that when you set yourself up with one of those trackers, they almost always ask you for your goal, and then they give you a certain amount to aim for. And truth be told, they are almost always wrong. I mean, they might either put you on way too much of a deficit, or they usually put the protein intake way too low. So I would just simply completely disregard whatever the goal they give you, and literally just trying to, and also being honest with yourself, not suddenly starting to eat really well, and just because it's that really seeing like, okay, what do I normally eat? This is where I'm at. I'm going to be brutally honest with myself, and then moving on from there.
Okay, thanks. And as far as like macros are concerned, how do we know what percentage of each? Let's just say Joe Public, because I appreciate, different people have different needs, and we'll talk more about that as we go. So if you're an athlete, you're probably gonna, look to increase carbs. But for someone just starting out and they are looking for pure health benefits, what sort of ratio would you sort of suggest?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think we had one question coming in regards to that as well. So basically, the first point after you establish where your calories should be at, so what your maintenance is or what your deficit or surplus calories are. When you have your calories, next thing is where should my protein be at? And that a good guide for that is almost always about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Almost always, because if somebody is super overweight and they weigh about 300 pounds, that's very unrealistic to set your protein goal that high. But in those cases, if somebody has a lot of weight to lose, I would say about 1 gram of protein per lean body mass. So that is almost always a really good place to go with. So setting your protein goal there. And then your carb and your fat distribution is a lot more intricate. So this really depends. If you have a big hormonal problem to fix, it's almost always better to have your fat goal higher. However, as you were alluding to, if somebody is almost only focused on performance, their hormones are at an acceptable level, we're going to distribute more of that to the carbs. And then the third thing that comes into place is always personal preference, because some people just really enjoy carby foods and other people are almost a little bit afraid of carbs, and they much prefer things like salmon, avocado, and those sort of things. And in that case, there's no harm in attributing more of the calories to fat. So it's really a little bit more individual there.
Okay, actually, you mentioned carbs, and we might as well get onto that topic now, because people are scared of carbs.
Yes.
As athletes, it is critical. People who want to lose weight, they think cutting carbs sort of is the answer. Can you enlighten us? Are carbs the enemy, as so many people are led to believe?
So I guess to put that statement out straight away, carbs are definitely not.
Oh no. Is anybody else? Can anyone else hear Lisa, or has she gone? Oh no. At that critical point, Lisa, come back. I will finish off her sentence though. Carbs are not the enemy. Okay, you should be consuming carbs as long as they're whole carbs. It's the sugar in carbs that are the enemy. Fingers crossed Lisa will rejoin us, hopefully soon, because we're on a very critical topic. Let me just see. Hold on. She is actually over in Mallorca at the moment, so hence probably the dicey connection. Unfortunately, she hasn't returned yet, but fingers crossed she will. So I hope you're all enjoying it so far. Now I'm on my iPad today and I can't see any chat questions coming in. Is that because I'm on my iPad, or are you asking questions and I'm missing them? Are you using your chats? Can you hear? You can't see a chat, or you? Oh, usually with this you can type as we go. Oh, no questions yet. That's fine. Excellent. As long as I'm not missing them, that's fine. Right. Good. So if you have got any questions, Louisa, please just fire away, and hopefully Lisa will be joining us very shortly, and yeah, and we can carry on with this. Oh no, Rod's got no chat. Okay, Rod, if you want to ask a question, just wave at me and I'll put you on unmute so you can ask a question. Okay, excellent. So yeah, no, the idea with today is we're just going to cover obviously a little bit on carbs, and then we're going to move a bit onto fad diets and things like that. Okay, so that is where all your questions might come in, and then we're going to tackle more sort of the performance side of things, because I know we've got a lot of cyclists, rowers, who are probably all looking for, you know, any tips. Rod's found chat. Fantastic. Excellent. We are happy about that. Let me just check, see if Lisa's back in the room. Oh no, she's not. Okay, no worries. Hopefully, Lisa will be able to rejoin us shortly. Bear with me. Hold on.
I found
Welcome back.
It's like emergency, your phone is overheating, you need to cool it down. I couldn't push any buttons, so I had to put it in the freezer in case this happens again. It's like literally my, so I apologize, but I've geared up my laptop now as well, so hopefully, you know, hopefully that is a backup.
That's good. So
yeah.
I finished off your last sentence when you said carbs were not the enemy. Oh, I'm just going to put everyone back onto, we've just been having a chat whilst you were away, so I'm just putting everyone back to mute, and I'll unmute you. Okay, hold on. I think we're there. Brilliant. We can crack on. So, carbohydrates.
Yeah, precisely. My bad. I really apologize. I have to tell everyone else I'm like in the middle of a Spanish backcountry in Mallorca, so it's a bit rough with the internet sometimes. And with the heat at the moment, it's 41.5 degrees. So if I look red, I am warm. But anyway, carbs. Yes, carbs. So actually, carbs are really our body's preferred immediate energy source, especially for the brain, but also for any kind of short burst activity in particular. So not necessarily just short bursts, but always the initial, so the first few seconds of any kind of activity, our body almost always goes back to carbs, unless, of course, you might have heard of ketosis, unless our body is so in like a fat burning mode that it only gets its energy from fat. But that only works if you really don't consume any carbs whatsoever, and for most people that's not sustainable, so we won't go down that rabbit hole. But carbs in general are a great fuel source, and the reason that it has received such a bad reputation in recent years mostly is because a lot of carbs are a process nowadays. So if you look at you know, horrible bread, at cookies, at cake, and so on, you name it, everything carbs. But the thing is, most of those items actually also have a lot of fat with them. So it's not necessarily just the carbs that are bad, it's just that those are often very high calorie dense food items. So of course, you know, you cut out the bread and suddenly you think, oh wow, I'm losing weight, or you cut out pasta or whatever. So it's not necessarily that it's that the carbs itself are bad. It's just if carbs put you in a calorie surplus, of course, yes, then they are going to make you gain weight. But the same applies to fat, and actually, well, not so much to protein, but if you eat too much fat or too much carbs, either way, you're going to gain weight. And so oftentimes people think it's just super easy to cut out carbs because it's not as hard to say, no thanks, I'm not going to have any bread at the restaurant, as it is, you know, saying, could you please use less oil when cooking in a restaurant? So that's often the case.
Brill. So as far as weight loss is concerned, Lisa, a lot of people, or a lot of clients I work with come to me and they're in that restriction mentality. They think that less is going to help them lose weight. Could you give us, or give those people a bit of advice if possible, and what does sort of undereating do to our bodies?
Yeah, it is actually super interesting that you're mentioning it, that, like, you know, I was saying, okay, calorie deficit will lead to weight loss, and calorie surplus will to weight gain. But yes, nowadays more and more clients are coming to us and they actually over exercise and they undereat. So yep. We always, more exercise is better and less food is better. But the thing with that is eventually, you're dieting, and first it works. At first you're losing weight and blah, blah, blah. But at some stage, your body, particularly your metabolism, is going to start down regulating. And that is because our body is actually really smart. If you think back to, whenever there was not that much food around, so basically you were in a calorie deficit, which probably was some kind of famine, and your body thought, oh my gosh, I'm almost starving, I'm almost dying. What can I do to prevent this from happening next time? So it's just going to downregulate a little bit, and you're going to be, burning less energy. And then what does that mean? Now you have to eat even less to burn more. You have to eat even less. At some stage, you're not going to get anywhere. You can't eat less than very little, and you can't exercise more than 6 days a week. So what we need to do, or where people go wrong there, is not implementing enough time at maintenance calories. So basically what you should do after every single time that you're dieting, ideally, is you should go back up to your maintenance. But most people just stop dieting and then they go back to their previous ways, and then they either gain all the weight back, or they think, oh, I'm not quite there where I want to be, and they keep cutting lower, and eventually also not fueling their performance anymore. So what's really important here to take away from this is have a plan for after your diet if you want to lose weight, and if you really want to fuel your performance, also make sure that you're definitely operating at least maintenance calories, if not slightly above that, because your body is really going to utilize almost everything that you give it really, really well for, muscle building, for energy, for just recovery as well.
So as far as calorie deficit is concerned for weight loss, what sort of, what is the maximum deficit you recommend, for someone to sort of, if they are looking to lose weight, is, go on.
That's a really good question. And I always say, start with the minimal effective dose. So you don't want to, if you find out your maintenance calories is 2,000, you could be thinking, oh, I want to lose a ton right now, so I'm going to cut down to 1,200, which is, almost cutting your calories in half. That would be kind of silly, because like I said, at some stage your body is going to recognize what's happening, and then it will stop responding in order to protect your body. So where do you go from 1,200 calories? You can't really go that much lower. That's already very, very little food. Instead, I would simply try going maybe like 100, 150 or 200 calories below, waiting a week or two, and then seeing how your body responds. Most of the time, you're going to get some kind of reaction already, and then kind of riding that wave out until nothing starts happening again for about 2 weeks. And then you could be like, okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of a deeper deficit, and then going down, and at the same time seeing, okay, do I want to cut calories, or would I like to add a little bit more cardio in here? So it's just, it's definitely always fine working with the minimal effective dose, because we don't want to go out too strong too quickly.
Yeah, brilliant. So patience is the key.
Yeah, and I mean, the other side of this is the mental aspect as well. You might be really eager and excited with your super steep deficit the first 2 weeks, but then you're going to eventually have that super craving, and you really can't stop it anymore. And next day you'll find yourself in the kitchen cupboards and just eating anything in sight, undoing everything good that you have already done. And what's the point of that? So it would be definitely steady, taking a little bit of a strategic break, steady, strategic break, rather than whoosh and then going back up. And all this yo-yo dieting is exactly where, most of the time people end up putting on more weight afterwards than what they were before, because it's really not the dieting that we're so bad at, it's more the sustaining that where people suck at. 95% of people gain their weight back after a diet, and 85% of that 95% gain more back than what they were previously. So I mean, that's a pretty crazy statistic. And definitely makes you think, like, come up with a good plan after your diet.
And I guess that's the thing, it's finding something that is sustainable, which leads me nicely on to all these fad diets that are out there. You mentioned it earlier, Lisa, and you sound like you have tried and tested a few. So yes. Can you share your experiences with us?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, out of, I guess, kind of curiosity, but also just more like not really knowing at the time what is right. So at first I kind of I tried, as I said, low carb, low fat, paleo, keto, a little bit of plant-based here and there, and I always felt restricted, like mentally, you know, excited at first, and you're like, oh wow, yes, I'm seeing some results, but then eventually that birthday came around and I wanted to have a piece of cake, or that Friday night came around and I wanted to have some wine and a pizza, and like you just can't fit that into paleo so well, or you know, whatever. And what happens then? You make it a cheat day, and a cheat day easily turns into a cheat weekend, or you know, you just, it's just, why would you want to cheat on your diet? It's just not really, it's not a healthy mindset, and the next day you think you need to burn it off. And so I just found the whole concept of being able to eat anything that I wanted, as long as, you know, the majority of it is a good amount of whole foods. And apart from that, I can fit anything that I want into my diet, not feel restricted. I can plan ahead and have a piece of cake if that means, you know, I'm going to have a little bit less carbs in my lunch. I can plan ahead, and I can go out for girls' night and have a glass of wine if that means I can balance it out with my breakfast. And as I said, overall, all of them work the same way. They just simply create a calorie deficit. But the other part of that is that in some of them, you don't only just get deprived from a mental aspect, you also sort of deprive yourself of some nutrients. So I actually see more and more people that come to me, you know, with a plant-based or vegan background, and they're low in energy. They don't do the research and think, okay, I'm cutting out all these animal products, I now need to supplement with XYZ. You can be vegan. I have a lot of vegan clients, and they're just vegan because for ethical reasons. But if people think they need to go vegan because it will help them lose weight, that's absolute crap. I mean, if you choose a plant-based diet, I'm totally someone to support that, but it's by no means necessary. And especially if you go plant-based and you don't do your research. And the same applies to, you know, keto, people that do keto, or people that do intermittent fasting. That was another thing that we wanted to touch on. And intermittent fasting can be a great strategy or great way also to simply reduce the amount of food that you're consuming, because you're cutting down your eating window. You know, like suddenly you have one meal less per day. That means 300-400 calories gone, and you're losing weight. Great. If you're somebody who's super busy in the morning and you don't really crave breakfast anyway, and you've always had a hard time getting breakfast down, great strategy for you. However, if you wake up and you get almost brain fogged, you can't wait, you're like counting the minutes until you can have that first meal, you're almost feeling a little bit anxious, which actually, like, a lot of women report when they go and do intermittent fasting, because our blood sugar levels are a lot less steady than men's blood sugar levels. So for someone like that, intermittent fasting is not a good strategy. It just always really kind of goes back to individualizing that approach, and that's where I'm so big on just really finding what fits for you. For me, there is no, you need to be low carb, you need to be low fat, or whatever. This is gonna fit everybody. It has to fit you and your lifestyle. If you're someone busy, super busy, I'm not gonna say to you, you need to eat 8 meals per day. However, if you know you're someone who's alone, who's meal prepping and so on, there's no issue, then yes, by all means, go ahead and have 6 to 8 meals a day. So it's really like what works for you and what feels good to you as well.
Brilliant. So actually now moving more on to sort of specific needs of people, you know, we've got a lot of sort of endurance athletes sort of in the group. So now sort of we'll look more at their needs. How would you, so from, you know, you've got your normal person, you know, sort of average activity levels, moving now to an endurance athlete, obviously their energy demands are going to be that much greater. So what advice would you give, you know, how are their needs different from a nutrition point of view?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, or in a few 10 years ago and so on, carbs were super big for endurance athletes, right? And then they kind of became, again, got a bad reputation, and now it's more like fuel your energy, fuel your long runs, especially ultras and so on, with fat. And actually, in my opinion, again, it's a bit of a combination, and B, personal preference thing. So if you are somebody who's generally really afraid of carbs, then I would definitely make sure to give you more fats to draw your energy from. And it's more about making your body be more flexible with what energy they're using. So if you will always have a high carb intake, your body is going to become very inflexible using fats as an energy resource. But if you always have a high fat intake and you're not really used to carbs, your body is not going to be very efficient with carbs. So with endurance athletes, sometimes carb cycling can be very efficient, so having high and low carb days. But again, mostly comes down to eating enough. That would be the very, very first point. And also a little bit of supplementation actually is super important for endurance athletes as well, just because of your high training volume most of the time. So things like magnesium is an absolute must for endurance athletes. I would also say things like omega-3 fatty acids, particularly if you don't eat fatty fish every single day or at least 3 times per week. Oftentimes vitamin D, depending where you live, depending how much you're actually training outside. And then
we're in the UK, so we don't get much sun. So UK athletes, definitely vitamin D.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Even in summertime, I often, for somebody living more in the northern hemisphere and so on, I usually say about 5,000 international units of vitamin D per day, and in wintertime up to 10,000. They really haven't shown any negative, studies or anything like that from high vitamin D intake. On the contrary, it's just super helpful for your hormones and for your metabolism as well, and recovery. And then in addition to that, it sort of depends on your lifestyle. Many women benefit from taking additional vitamin B, especially if you're not eating a lot of red meat. The other thing can be iron or zinc. And yeah, so it kind of depends.
Oh, Lisa. Come back, Lisa. Bear with me.
So this is my laptop now. I can only hope that this won't overheat. Yes.
Oh, no. This is it, the final measure.
Exactly.
So,
So, yeah.
welcome back, Lisa.
Thank
It's
you.
usually me with the technology issues, so I'm quite pleased it's transferred to someone else. So we were talking about supplements for endurance athletes. I think you just mentioned the vitamin B, potentially for women.
Yes.
So yeah, feel free to
Continue there. Sure. Yeah. And zinc can also be another thing, super helpful. And then anything else, of course, things like protein powder. And so I don't necessarily consider supplements at first. Like for me, supplement is really just mostly vitamins and minerals, but we can get into the protein powder as well, and all the rest that's kind of linked with that. So most of the time, especially around training, your best choice for protein powder, or let me get out of the way first, if you don't have a problem consuming enough protein just with whole food sources, that's great. There's no need to consume protein powder if your meals are ready prepared. If you have a meal within about 60 minutes or so after your training and you have no issues hitting your 1 gram per pound of body weight roughly of protein per day with just whole food. However, protein can be super convenient, as we all know. Sometimes after a meal you don't really, I still need to pick up this and I still need to do that, and then it's like 2-3 hours before we have anything to eat. Not ideal, especially if we want to fuel performance and if we want to make the most out of our training. So in those cases, protein powder can be very handy, or also as a pre-workout sort of snack or meal, I guess, sometimes. And then when choosing protein powder around your training, the purest form of protein powder, which is going to be absorbed most easily by your body, is a whey protein isolate. It's better than a whey protein concentrate because concentrate is not quite as pure. It's also more easily absorbed than a plant-based protein, and it's definitely better around training than things like casein, or absolutely better than a collagen protein. So casein is a great protein powder to take, let's say, in a snack before you go to bed or something like that, because it's a very slow release protein. That's not what we want before or after your training. Before or after your training, we want your body to really literally absorb protein like as quickly as possible and utilize it as quickly as possible. Collagen, something to touch on as well, because that's super in at the moment. It actually doesn't get used at all for muscle protein synthesis. It actually only just like you consume it, it pretty much straight away goes to your joints, to your hair, to your skin, to your basically tissue repair, which is great too, but it doesn't get utilized for muscle protein synthesis. So I would advise against collagen around training times. I would really just focus on whey protein isolate around training. And, you know, if you, overall, I'd probably limit my artificial or processed protein intake to about 2 servings per day. So if you have a scoop of protein powder and you have a protein bar, I would probably say that should be about it. I wouldn't necessarily go above 2, or maybe having like a protein shake before your training and then mixing in a scoop of protein in your oats, and that's cool as well. And if you're mixing it up like that, you could easily have like whey protein around your training and then mixing a plant-based one in your oats away from your training time. That's also fine if you want to mix it up a bit. So yeah, that in regards to protein. And if you're somebody who manages to hit 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, there's actually also no need to necessarily consume things like BCAAs or EAAs. Unless you are vegan, in that case, I would probably still say, yes, do a supplement with BCAAs, just so we make sure we cover all our branch chain amino acids. So what BCAAs essentially are, or I mean, proteins, we split them up in 27 different amino acids, 7 of which are essential. That means your body can't really get by or produce them it's by itself. And that's why if you don't consume them, you know, you're kind of lacking something there. So if you're vegan, you're going to have a hard time getting all of those 27 amino acids most of the time. That's why we say for vegans, do supplement with BCAAs. In all other cases, if you're consuming plenty of protein, your chances are very, 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 very high that you're covering all of those 27 amino acids anyway. But there is no real harm in having a BCAA shake if you just really kind of enjoy having a flavored water with your training, or you just kind of want to cover your bases. It's kind of like an insurance policy, you know. But if you want to save money, there's no need to have BCAAs as well.
Right. And as far as protein is concerned, is there any sort of maximum amount that our body can absorb in any one sitting?
That's yeah, very, very good question. So for protein, it's kind of, you can compare it to a sprinkler system on your lawn. If you just like chuck all the water on your lawn and you sort of drown it in one sitting, it's going to have a hard time absorbing that. It still does a bit of a job, but it's not as ideal as if you put the sprinkler on in the morning and then maybe in the afternoon a little bit, you know, so just keeping it more steady. And the same applies to protein. Ideally, we want to have it spread out evenly across the day, especially for our leucine levels. So that's something else which is a little bit intricate. So if we have not enough protein in a meal, then often we don't even trigger that muscle protein synthesis. So let's say you go about your day and your first 3 meals, you hardly have any protein, and then you think you need to make up for it in the evening. Yes, it's still better than not consuming enough protein overall, but still it would be better if you could spread it out and like constantly trigger your muscle protein synthesis over the course of the day rather than just that one big hit per day. So I always recommend somewhere between 0.8, so as I said, that 1 gram per pound of body weight is usually ideal, but like over the course of the day, but anywhere between 0.8 to 1.2 grams if you like to consume a little bit more in your total daily intake is good. But you asked more about the individual meal, so I would definitely make sure that you get over 20 grams of protein per meal. What the absolute maximum level is kind of hard to say. It depends on your body size. It depends on how much muscle you have. For most, you know, reasonably lean and active females, it would probably be somewhere around 60 to 70 grams in a sitting. For men, probably more around like the 80, 90 grams per sitting.
Okay, that's great. And as far as pre and post workout? We've obviously covered protein.
Yes.
So looking maybe now, what would you with obviously carbs are really important for training. Pre and post workout, how would you, or what would you recommend as far as carbohydrate need to optimize performance?
Yeah, so our pre and post workout window is really when carbs are going to be utilized very best. So if you are somebody who's afraid of carbs, start introducing them more around your workouts. That's basically, you know, if you picture your cells and they're like just open and it all gets basically utilized straight away to replenish your glycogen store. So particularly around your workout times is really great. A good place to start is, you know, having in your pre and post-workout meals, having something somewhere around about half your body weight in kilograms in grams of carbs. So, you know, if you weigh 50 kg, something like 25 grams of carbs in your pre and post-workout meal is a good minimum to start. And yeah, so that would be a good recommendation. And in terms of it also depends though how far away from your training your meal is. You know, if you're just having a snack maybe an hour or 90 minutes before, I think that's a really good guideline. If you're opting for an actual meal, like a full meal, then definitely you consume more than just that rough guideline that I just mentioned. So yeah, absolutely focus on carbs and protein before and post workout. Keep fats minimal because fats slow down digestion, slow down absorption. So if you consume more fats with your pre and post workout meals, again, your body's not going to absorb the nutrients quite as well. So your trail mix is not actually an ideal pre or post workout meal, or, you know, peanut butter or something like that. Just more like a banana and a protein shake, a protein bar, and something like Greek yogurt and berries, even oats and a bit of protein powder mixed in. That can be a really good kind of snack pre or post workout, or more of a meal could chicken and rice with some easily digestible spinach, sweet potato, and like lean ground beef. Those things are really good, make really good pre and post workout meals.
Okay, thank you. Back to supplements, actually, I've just suddenly thought, one supplement a lot of certainly weightlifters use is creatine.
Yes.
Would you recommend that for endurance athletes? Are there benefits?
Yes, absolutely. I did forget to mention that earlier. I would not just recommend that to endurance athletes. I would actually not even just recommend that to athletes. They have even done lots of studies on elderly and on children, on teenagers, where they have shown lots of cognitive benefits of creatine. So creatine, first of all, is the most studied supplement there is in the whole of the supplement world, sort of thing. They have shown, so basically what it does, it helps your body bring more energy quicker back into the cell. So you're able to go again quicker, right? Basically it helps you replenish your ATP, which is the smallest form of energy that our body breaks any kind of food down to. And by doing that, it's not just that you're recovering better, but you also have more energy for your brain available quicker. So it has shown to help prevent things like Alzheimer's, like dementia, just kind of benefited learning in teenagers, like I was saying. So I would absolutely recommend creatine for anybody. And also there used to be a bit of a myth that you have to cycle it on and off because otherwise your body gets intolerant to it. And that has been debunked. It's absolutely safe to continue taking creatine like through basically any kind of day. About most of the time, I'd say about 5 grams for women, about 10 grams for men, so about 5 to 10 grams overall daily. And it doesn't really matter if you consume it with your workout, before your workout, after, any time of the day is absolutely fine.
Brill. Just going back to sort of carbs and that sort of thing with training intensities. So obviously as endurance athletes, we have high intensity days, lower intensity. You sort of mentioned about cycling carbs earlier on. Would you sort of say we should fit that into with the intensity at which we're training?
So that's a bit more of an advanced strategy. I would absolutely make sure you have your other bases covered first. So just making sure that you're consuming enough overall, number one, that you're consuming, you know, enough protein, and so overall, so that you have all those bases covered first, because it still comes down to weekly average calories in terms of whether you're losing weight or not, or fueling performance. And if you feel reasonably comfortable tracking, if you feel reasonably comfortable with your macro distribution and meal quality, then I would say, heck yes, let's try and aim for that optimum even more. You know, we have those 98% covered. Now we can really hone down on those last 2%, and carb cycling would play into that for sure. But until you kind of get there, I would not necessarily worry about that unless it's something that you would be naturally inclined to do. So let's say like you're feeling a lot more hungry on your long training days, then straight away, then you could consider simply trying to have about 100 calories more on that day. So like 25 grams of carbs, seeing if you feel better. And on your non-training days, or your days where you're, you know, having lower training volume, you could see if intuitively you're feeling less hungry. However, sometimes our intuition doesn't really tell the truth, because actually recovery can go on for more than 24 hours after our actual training. It can go up to, you know, 72 hours sometimes. So even if you're not feeling that hungry the next day, you might recover better if your carb intake is still the same.
Yep, that's great. So you said about sort of the importance of carbs and that with training. What about fasted training? You know, some people train early in the mornings, haven't got time for breakfast.
Yeah.
What would you recommend in that case?
Again, it depends. Unfortunately, that's usually the answer. So if you really don't have time before you're training to eat anything, and you don't necessarily feel like you're running out of energy, or like you're not as fueled as you could be, there's nothing really wrong with training. However, if you're like really, really serious about your performance, most likely I would still recommend at least something like a banana, or like a shake. You can also have mix some carbs into your shake. Like if you're actually a performance athlete, then I would most likely recommend that say that your training will benefit from you having at least a little something about half an hour or so before your training. If you're just really busy, if you're just like into weight loss and you're just doing it for the fun of it, you're not feeling super hungry, and you feel like you have plenty of energy because you had a big meal the night before, there's nothing wrong with a fasted training.
Right, that's great. And
also, I should add to that, it's also not necessarily that much like that beneficial for weight loss. It's not suddenly like, yay, I'm doing fasted cardio, I'm gonna burn 3 times the amount. That's not actually how it works. There's like a 1% chance that it might burn a little bit more if you're training fasted, but you know, that's not really a big thing overall.
okay, that's great. Actually, I'm just looking back at some of the chats, Lisa, and Rod was asking if it's per pound of lean body weight as opposed to total body weight. I think he's talking about protein. How would he work out his lean weight? That's a good question, Rod.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Very good question. I mean, things like those body weight scales, and so they're not very accurate, but you know, a lot of gyms have them nowadays, or often even like at home, your scales, oftentimes they even tell kind of your body fat percentage nowadays. So you know, if you weigh 200 pounds and it says you have 20% body fat, then obviously that would be like 160 pounds of lean body mass, that kind of thing. So you could work it out that way. However, I wouldn't necessarily, unless you feel like you're definitely very overweight, you have more than, let's say, 25 pounds to lose. In that case, I would probably just go with 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, because it just makes it easier. And if you're struggling to get to that goal, because that is quite a high protein goal, just start where you are and try to increase, you know, week by week or every 2 weeks, and see that you can get closer to that goal, You don't need to go from a protein intake of 70 grams today to 150 or 200 grams tomorrow, that would probably give you a little bit of a digestive discomfort as well. Just working your way up. Progress over perfection is always the way to go.
Yes, I think that goes back to the mentality. It's not an all or nothing mentality, and actually perfection probably isn't a healthy mentality to pursue in this case.
Absolutely.
So everything in moderation, as they say. I've also just seen another question. I think we've just got a query about was it hydrostate whey or isolate that was recommended as far as protein?
Yes, isolate, please. A whey protein isolate. Of course, a good way to know if you, or a good way to know if you have a good whey protein is the less ingredients usually the better. So they often have a ton of fillers, they have some sort of gum, preservatives, whatever. Ideally, a good whey protein isolate would literally say whey protein isolate, and if it's something flavored like chocolate, it would probably have whey protein isolate, preferably from like grass-fed cows, preferably organic, but anyway, and then cacao, and then a plant-based, or not plant-based, a natural sweetener like stevia. Like 3 ingredients, that would be a good whey protein isolate. If you have an ingredient list like this where you can't read half of it or more, it's likely not very pure and likely a little bit hard to digest. It might even give you bloating. So yeah, the less ingredients, the better.
Real. And actually, just thinking back to training, what would you say? We've sort of covered pre-post workout. What about during workout? So obviously, a lot of our guys or the endurance athletes, they do train for sort of over an hour.
Yes.
Would you recommend having an additional source of sort of energy, carbohydrate during that time?
So it depends on the actual duration. If it's over an hour, like anywhere under an hour, I wouldn't definitely not bother with it. If it's over an hour, I would advise just kind of being mindful of your own energy level. If you can feel like you're declining, then yes, absolutely. Some intra workout carbs could be great, whether that is in terms of like something liquid, very, very easily absorbed carb source, better than dextrose or dextrin or maltodextrose or whatever, is highly branched cyclic dextrin, which is like the purest form of carbs. Your body basically just takes it in. That could be a really good intra workout carb source. But I would also say it depends on what time of the season you are in. If it's kind of early conditioning, sometimes it's worth just pushing through it and like almost how do I want this like challenging your body, I guess, to use up the last energy resources. However, if it's more in a competitive phase and you're really just trying to optimize your performance even more, then I would say, yes, for sure, include the carb source. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Well, thank you very much. Final, I think Louisa's just asking about those fitness apps that you mentioned earlier. I think Louisa came in late.
Yeah,
so
no
she
problem.
missed the first bit.
So the one that I use, and which is actually quite popular, many of them you can also link to any kind of activity trackers, like, you know, if you're tracking your runs and so on. So I use MyFitnessPal. There's another one which is called My Macros. There's another one that's called Lose It. And then you have one which is called Chronometer. And so they all basically do the same thing. In terms of fitness trackers that you can link to them, I just want you to be mindful though that oftentimes when you do link them, the app will suggest, oh, you've burned 1,000 calories in your workout today. So first of all, those trackers often very, very wrong. They have actually shown that they overestimate your calories burned anywhere between 35 to 95%, and that is huge. So, you know, oftentimes you might think, I've done a 1 hour workout, I got a good sweat on. Yeah, sure, I burned 1,200 calories when you actually only burned like 400. And that is very, very likely actually. So I would not rely on that. And when the app is offering you, you know, like subtract these calories, or you can add those calories back in. Now you're allowed to eat 3,000 calories today. I don't work with that. I usually, when I give someone a macro prescription or calorie prescription, I take their overall activity level into consideration, and I give them a goal to focus on. And I want you to first become consistent with hitting that goal every single day, and not really worrying about, oh, today I burned 300 calories and tomorrow I'm going to burn 700. And that just makes it super, super confusing and difficult for you. So aim for the same amount every single day. Your body is going to thank you, because our bodies actually thrive on routine, on consuming the same or like similar amounts of protein and carbs and fats every single day. So don't get too confused, and try to make it a little bit simpler and easier for yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions to ask Lisa? Speak now or forever hold your... There's silence. I think that's it. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone has learned a lot. I know how I have. Really appreciate your time. And yes, I do hope everyone enjoyed it. And keep an eye out. More interviews are coming up, including with the big man himself, Eddie Fletcher. Okay, that's the big one in September. But no, today, thank you, Lisa. Nutrition is so important. Oh, Roz has got a quick question. Quick, Roz!
In the meantime,
we're just going to wait for Roz to ask her question.
In the meantime, I'll just say thank you so much for having me. And once again, I apologize for the technical disturbances, but out here you can't really plan for that. If somebody is interested in more of my content, I try to put out quite a bit of educational things on social media as well. So if you want to give me a follow on Instagram, my handle is Coach Lisa, and in one word, _TCM, which is the company that I work for, Tailored Coaching Method. So Coach Lisa _TCM is my Instagram handle. And yeah, I try to put out some valuable information on there as well. So I would love for you to give me a follow.
That's great. What I will do actually, Lisa, is I'll post the recording on my Facebook page, okay. And I'll put a link to all your information as well, so everyone can, everyone can join on. Right, so Roz's question, we have it through. What do you think of citrulline, I can't even say it, citrulline malate?
I'm stuttering. So first of all, I don't really recommend it or use it with a lot of my clients or athletes. I think it's it falls somewhere in that 1% of things where it could potentially benefit some people occasionally for performance and recovery, but I have never actually prescribed it or recommended it to anybody. I think it's there's not enough research on it that has been done, or that at least not enough proven benefits for it. So I would say save your money and put that money towards either a good fish oil, or good magnesium, or even a good quality piece of steak or salmon or something like that.
There you go. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Bye.